When a woman begins to ignore you, most men panic. They chase, they text repeatedly, they beg for attention, and in doing so, they give away all their power. But here's the truth: attention is the most valuable thing a man can give. And the moment you learn to withdraw it with discipline and composure, you step into a completely different league. Because attention, when scarce, becomes power. A woman doesn't respect a man who makes himself too available. She respects the man who values his time, his presence, and his energy enough to walk away when it's not being appreciated. When you pull back, you're not playing games. You're restoring balance. You're reminding her that access to you is earned, not owed. C. When a woman feels that your attention is guaranteed no matter how she behaves, she starts to lose respect for you. It's not because she's cruel or manipulative, it's psychological. Human beings naturally undervalue what's always available. It's the law of scarcity. What's rare, we value. What's constant, we take for granted. So when you stop chasing, when you withdraw, you activate something deeper, curiosity. And curiosity is the seed of attraction. Now, it's important to understand that silence doesn't mean coldness or hostility. It's not about being petty or trying to hurt her. It's about demonstrating calm strength, the kind that says, I'm not here to convince anyone to value me. The man who can remain centered while being ignored communicates a level of emotional control that most people can't achieve. He's showing, not telling, that his self-worth isn't determined by external validation. That's the kind of energy that makes people reevaluate how they've treated you. Because when you stop showing up where you're not appreciated, your absence begins to speak. There's a psychological mechanism at play here, the contrast effect. When you pull away, she feels the emotional contrast between your presence and your absence. She remembers the attention, the consistency, the comfort, the feeling of being desired, and suddenly it's gone. That void is powerful. It creates space for reflection. In that silence, she begins to question, why isn't he reaching out? Did he lose interest? Did I push too far? That's when the shift happens. The same woman who ignored your messages starts checking your social media, asking mutual friends about you, or sending those subtle, indirect texts to test the waters. And that's not coincidence. That's psychology. But this only works if your withdrawal comes from strength, not from a need to manipulate. If you're sitting there waiting anxiously for her to notice, refreshing her profile, wondering if she'll text you back, then you've missed the point. You haven't truly withdrawn. You've only paused your chase. True withdrawal means redirecting your energy into yourself. It means saying, if she's not choosing me, I choose me. You take that same attention you were giving to her and reinvest it in your mission, your growth, your peace. The gym, the business, the goals you've neglected while focusing on her, that's how you turn emotional pain into power. A man who can discipline his attention controls his reality. Most men give their attention emotionally, impulsively, to anyone who shows them interest, or worse, to anyone who withholds it. But when you start treating your attention as something sacred, you separate yourself from the majority. Women sense that energy immediately. There's something magnetic about a man who isn't desperate to be seen or validated. It creates mystery, and mystery creates intrigue. She starts to wonder what occupies your mind, what drives you, what makes you so calm and unaffected. That curiosity becomes attraction, and that attraction grows in your absence. You have to understand something. Teaching her the price of ignoring you doesn't happen through confrontation or words. It happens through silence, through your focus on becoming a man who no longer needs her to feel valuable. Every time you resist the urge to reach out, you reinforce your own strength. Every time you choose your peace over proving your worth, you become more centered. And when she finally realizes that the attention she once took for granted has disappeared, that realization hits hard. That's when she starts to feel what you felt. The roles reverse, not because you sought revenge, but because you respected yourself enough to stop chasing validation. Withdrawing your attention is not about punishment, it's about self mastery. It's about detaching your emotions from her response and reconnecting them to your own standards. You don't beg for someone's attention. You don't explain your silence. You let your calmness communicate everything. And that quiet, grounded energy does more than any speech ever could. So when a woman ignores you, remember the moment you stop chasing her, you start teaching her. Not through anger, not through argument, but through absence. You teach her that your time, your focus, and your attention are privileges, not entitlements. You teach her that ignoring a man of value has consequences, not because he's trying to make her feel small, but because he refuses to make himself smaller to be seen. And that's the lesson. You don't teach her by demanding respect. You teach her by embodying it. Withdraw your attention, reclaim your power, and let your silence do the talking. The ones who are meant for you will recognize your value, not when you're chasing them, but when you finally stop. When you start valuing yourself above her approval, everything changes. Most men don't even realize how much of their identity is tied to how a woman responds to them. They measure their worth by her attention, her texts, her validation. And the moment she withdraws it, they crumble. But the truth is, if your sense of value depends on anyone else's recognition, you'll always be at their mercy. That's not love. That's dependency disguised as desire. A man grounded in self-respect doesn't chase after approval. He embodies it. He moves through life with the quiet confidence of someone who knows his worth isn't negotiable. And that kind of man is rare. See, women can sense energy. They can tell when your confidence is authentic and when it's borrowed from their validation. When you make her the source of your self-esteem, she can feel it instantly. The neediness in your tone, the anxiety in your silence, the desperation in your gestures. And nothing kills attraction faster than a man who needs her more than he needs himself. But when you flip that dynamic, when you begin to operate from a place of inner value, the entire tone of the relationship shifts. You stop asking questions like, what did I do wrong? And start asking, is this behavior aligned with what I deserve? You stop trying to fix yourself to meet her standards and instead live according to your own. And here's the irony: the moment you stop trying to win her approval, that's when she starts trying to win yours. Because confidence, true confidence, isn't something you perform, it's something you radiate. Every time you chase her approval, you tell her and yourself that she's the prize. But when you're living with purpose, when your energy is directed toward your growth, your peace, and your mission, you become the prize. And the moment she realizes she's no longer the center of your emotional universe, something in her shifts. The same attention she once took for granted suddenly feels scarce. The same man she thought would always be there starts to feel distant, focused unavailable, not because you're playing games, but because you finally remembered who you are. This is the point where emotional detachment becomes your greatest strength. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means emotional discipline, the ability to care deeply without losing yourself. It's the art of being invested but never dependent. A man who has mastered detachment doesn't need to chase approval because his value is already defined internally. That's what draws people toward him. There's something magnetic about a man who isn't trying to prove anything. He's calm, he's steady, he's secure, and security, not arrogance, not dominance, is what women ultimately find irresistible. When you value yourself, you start to see rejection differently. It's no longer a reflection of your inadequacy. It's a filter revealing who's not meant for you. You stop personalizing everything. You stop taking her silence as an insult. You understand that attraction is either mutual or it isn't, and no amount of convincing can force it. That's freedom. That's peace. The man who needs approval is a slave to it. The man who values himself is free, and that freedom makes you unpredictable, not in a manipulative sense, but in a way that commands respect. She can't toy with you emotionally because you're no longer reacting. You've become the calm in the storm. You're not trying to prove your worth anymore. You're living it. You're not chasing her to feel validated. You're chasing your goals, your purpose, your peace. And that's when she starts to feel your absence, not just physically, but emotionally, because she can sense that your life is moving forward with or without her. Most men think love is about convincing someone to choose them, but the truth is, love begins when you choose yourself. That's the foundation of healthy attraction. When a woman feels that your attention comes from abundance, not neediness, it holds weight. She knows you could walk away if you're disrespected. She knows you're not afraid to be alone. And that quiet confidence is what separates the men who get ignored from the men who are remembered. This mindset also protects your peace. When you no longer seek approval, you stop overanalyzing her every move. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes, wondering if she's going to reply. You stop spiraling into self-doubt because your emotional state no longer depends on her behavior. That's the essence of masculine composure. Control over yourself, not over others. And once you develop that, your entire energy changes. You carry yourself differently. You speak differently. You move differently. And that energy alone demands respect. When you operate from a place of value, you teach people how to treat you without ever needing to say a word, because your actions, your restraint, your silence, your focus speak for you. You stop begging for love and start inspiring it. You stop chasing connection and start attracting it. That's the paradox. The less you try to gain approval, the more naturally it comes, because approval is magnetic only to those who don't depend on it. So the next time you feel that urge to seek validation, to text her, to explain yourself, to prove your worth, stop, take a breath, remind yourself that your value doesn't increase when she notices you, and it doesn't decrease when she ignores you. Her approval can never give you what self-respect already provides. You don't need to convince anyone to see your worth. You just need to stop forgetting it yourself. Let your absence speak louder than your words. That's one of the hardest lessons to learn, but one of the most powerful truths you'll ever live. When someone ignores you, your natural instinct is to react, to explain yourself, to defend your worth, to chase after clarity. You want to fix it to be understood. But every time you try to prove your value to who's withdrawn, you communicate the opposite. You show them that their silence controls you, that your emotional state depends on their attention. And that's the moment you lose power. Your absence, on the other hand, is your voice of strength. It communicates everything words could never say. When you step back without drama, without resentment, without emotional chaos, you send a message that's impossible to ignore. I value my peace more than your attention. Most people talk about boundaries, but very few live them. True boundaries are not declared, they're demonstrated, and your absence is the clearest boundary of all. When you remove yourself from someone who's taking you for granted, something interesting happens. They begin to feel the emotional contrast. See, your presence has energy. Your attention has weight. Your consistency, your warmth, your interest, those things have value. But when they're always available, they fade into the background. People adapt to whatever's consistent, and over time, even the most meaningful gestures can start to feel ordinary. That's why your withdrawal hits harder than any argument ever could. It reintroduces scarcity. It reminds her of what life feels like without you. There's a psychological principle called emotional displacement. It means people only begin to appreciate something after it's gone. When you pull away, you trigger that awareness. Suddenly, the silence that she thought she wanted becomes uncomfortable. She starts to notice the emptiness between messages, the quiet where your energy used to be. She remembers how you used to make her feel, not because you reminded her, but because your absence forces her to confront the loss on her own. That's when curiosity begins to replace indifference. But for this to work, your silence has to come from self-control, not manipulation. The difference is subtle but crucial. If you're waiting anxiously, checking your phone every hour to see if she noticed, you're still chasing emotionally. Silence only becomes powerful when it's peaceful, when you've genuinely detached and redirected your focus inward. You're not trying to teach her a lesson. You're simply choosing to no longer give energy to a situation that doesn't honor your worth. That level of detachment is magnetic because most people aren't capable of it. Most people panic when they lose attention. A man who remains calm, grounded, and unbothered in the face of indifference radiates something rare: emotional mastery. Your absence is also a mirror. It reflects back to her what she's contributed or failed to contribute to the connection. It gives her space to feel her own emotions without your influence. And in that space, she begins to realize that the dynamic has shifted. The man she once thought she could ignore is no longer available. The comfort of knowing you'll always be there is gone. And that's when the realization sets in that your presence was not just convenient, it was valuable. This is why chasing never works. The more you push for attention, the less it's given. But when you step back, you create emotional distance, and distance breeds desire. Desire isn't born out of constant availability. It's born from absence, from uncertainty, from the awareness that something valuable might be slipping away. That tension is what reignites attraction. But the irony is, when you finally reach that level of inner peace, you stop caring whether the attraction returns or not. You're no longer seeking validation. You've already validated yourself. That's where true power lies, in your ability to walk away without bitterness. To know that your silence isn't punishment, it's preservation. You're protecting yourself, respect. You're protecting your energy. You're no longer trying to convince anyone to choose you because you've already chosen yourself. And that's when people begin to notice. That's when your absence becomes undeniable. Most men think they lose a woman when she ignores them. The truth is, you only lose her when you refuse to let her feel your absence. Because your attention was her mirror, too, it reflected her sense of worth in your eyes. When you pull that reflection away, she's left to look inward. That's the most powerful form of awakening there is. And it only happens when you stop explaining, stop reacting, and stop chasing. So don't underestimate the power of silence. Let it breathe. Let it speak. Let her feel the void that your energy once filled. It's not about making her regret. It's about reclaiming your dignity. Your silence carries a frequency that words can't reach. It says, I am no longer available to situations that don't value me. That's strength. That's maturity. That's self-respect. When you learn to let your absence speak, you stop wasting time trying to convince others to see your worth. You start embodying it, and people eventually hear that message loud and clear, not because you shouted it, but because you were willing to walk away and stay silent long enough for the silence itself to do the talking. When a woman ignores you, your ego wants revenge, but your higher self wants growth. And this is where most men fail. They respond emotionally instead of intelligently. They get stuck trying to prove a point rather than learning the lesson. But the truth is, the best way to teach anyone the price of losing you is to evolve beyond them. Growth is the most powerful revenge because it forces the other person to witness your transformation while realizing they no longer have access to it. When she ignores you, it's easy to take it personally. You start wondering what you did wrong, where things went off track, why she's pulling away. That kind of self-questioning can become toxic if you let it spiral. But if you reframe it, if you see her distance not as rejection, but as redirection, everything changes. Her silence becomes feedback. It's life's way of telling you it's time to level up, to recenter your focus on yourself instead of on someone who doesn't recognize your value right now. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Men who chase after closure or validation waste precious time that could be spent becoming stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. The truth is, you don't need her to acknowledge your worth for it to exist. You simply need to live in a way that makes it undeniable. That means shifting from emotional reaction to disciplined action. Instead of asking why she's ignoring you, ask yourself, what have I been ignoring in myself? Because often the rejection you experience from someone else, areas where you've neglected your own growth. The beauty of emotional maturity is that it allows you to turn pain into purpose. Every setback, every disappointment, every unanswered text becomes fuel. You start to understand that this moment, the one that hurts so much right now, is the very thing that's sculpting your strength. While other men chase temporary validation, you build something permanent, character, because growth doesn't happen when things are easy. It happens when you're forced to face discomfort and choose discipline over reaction. That's what separates men who crumble from men who rise. The weak man reacts, the strong man reflects. He steps back, looks at the situation objectively, and asks, what is this trying to teach me? That question alone turns pain into progress. It gives your suffering meaning. And when your suffering has meaning, it no longer controls you. it refines you. Here's the truth: most men never accept trying to make her regret losing you is still giving her power, because your focus is still on her. But when you let go of that outcome and focus purely on your evolution, you take your power back. She's no longer the motivation. You are. Your growth stops being a performance and becomes a natural consequence of your self-respect. You start improving your body, your mind, your finances, your peace, not to get her attention back, but to honor the man you're becoming. That's the energy that shifts everything. And the irony is that's usually when she comes back, because energy never lies. When she sees that you've evolved without resentment, that you've moved forward with purpose and calmness, she feels the difference. You're no longer the man who needed her approval to feel secure. You've detached, elevated, and found strength within yourself. That's when your growth becomes the loudest statement you could ever make. But whether she comes back or not shouldn't matter, because growth isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. It's about raising your standard for what kind of energy you allow into your life. A man who grows from pain no longer needs validation from the one who caused it. He's not seeking revenge through success. He's simply living in alignment with his true worth. That kind of peace, that quiet sense of power, is something no one can take away from you. Think of it this way: when you choose growth over reaction, you teach her and everyone else that you're not a man who breaks when ignored. You're a man who builds. You don't collapse when disrespected. You evolve. You don't chase what's fading. You invest in what's lasting. That's what emotional strength looks like in its highest form. The truth is, she may never see how much her silence changed you. She may never understand the role her indifference played in your evolution, but that's not your concern, because your growth isn't about her anymore. It's about you reclaiming your focus, your energy, and your purpose. Every time you choose progress over pain, you prove something powerful to yourself: that you're not defined by who ignores you, but by how you respond to being ignored. So when she distances herself, don't chase. Don't try to explain. Don't even try to prove her wrong. Just grow. Let your transformation do the talking. Because nothing teaches a person the price of ignoring you more effectively than watching you become the man they can no longer reach. And that's the beauty of growth. It doesn't just heal you, it humbles them. But more importantly, it elevates you into the kind of man who no longer needs anyone's approval to feel whole. That's where real strength lies. That's where peace begins. So remember this: when she ignores you, rise higher. Don't react. Don't shrink. Evolve. Because the man who grows from rejection never loses, he transforms. One of the greatest mistakes men make when a woman starts ignoring them is continuing to give her attention anyway. They think that if they just show more effort, more care, more consistency, somehow she'll realize what she's missing. But that's not how attraction works. The moment you start rewarding disrespect or indifference with your attention, you communicate weakness. You send the message that she can treat you however she wants, and you'll still be there waiting. And once a woman senses that your boundaries are flexible, that your time and your energy have no conditions, her respect for you begins to erode. Respect is the foundation of attraction. Without it, desire cannot survive. And the truth is, you can't teach someone to respect you by talking about it. You do it through action, or more precisely, through inaction. by not rewarding bad behavior, by refusing to invest your time and emotional energy into someone who isn't reciprocating it. It's not about playing games or acting cold. It's about maintaining your self-respect. Because a man who can't say no when he's disrespected will never be taken seriously, not by a woman, not by anyone. This is where emotional discipline becomes your greatest asset. The man who reacts emotionally, who keeps reaching out even when he's being ignored, is showing that his need for connection outweighs his self-respect. That's not love, that's insecurity. Love that requires you to abandon your dignity isn't love worth having. When you reward someone's indifference with more attention, you're teaching them that their silence holds power over you. And once that power dynamic is established, it's almost impossible to reverse. The real strength lies in doing nothing. That might sound counterintuitive, especially if you've been conditioned to believe that persistence equals care. But there's a huge difference between persistence and desperation. Persistence is pursuing something that's mutually valued. Desperation is chasing something that's already walked away. When you stop rewarding a woman's indifference, you reclaim your leverage, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a reflection of self-worth. You're saying, if you can't meet me with the same energy I give, you lose access to me. And here's what happens next. When she realizes that her silence no longer gets your attention, that you're not reacting, not chasing, not trying to fix things, she starts to question the power she thought she had. She'll begin to feel the void your presence used to fill. She'll wonder why you've stopped showing up, and that's when she begins to feel the shift. Because what people can't control, they start to respect. What they can't easily influence, they start to value. But again, this only works when your silence is genuine, when it's not a tactic, but a natural extension of your standards. You're not ignoring her to make her jealous. You're not pretending to be indifferent while secretly checking your phone every hour. You're detached because you understand one simple truth: energy must be reciprocated to be sustained. You've accepted that your attention is sacred, and you refuse to give it to anyone who hasn't earned it. That's what separates emotionally grounded men from the rest. You have to start thinking of your attention the same way you think of your money. You wouldn't invest in something that doesn't give a return, right? So why invest emotionally in someone who's showing you no effort, no consistency, no genuine interest? That's not strength. That's self-abandonment. When you start treating your time, your focus as valuable, other people will begin to treat it that way too. Your standards create the framework for how others behave around you. It's not about being cold or heartless. It's about being selective. You can care about someone and still refuse to tolerate disrespect. You can have empathy without sacrificing your dignity. The most attractive men are those who can remain calm in the face of indifference, who know when to engage and when to walk away. Their power doesn't come from aggression. It comes from restraint. They know that the loudest message isn't sent through confrontation, but through silence. And that silence, when it comes from self-assurance, speaks volumes. It says, I'm not here to convince you to value me. You either recognize my worth or you lose access to it. That's not arrogance. That's emotional maturity. That's what teaches her the real price of ignoring you. It's not anger. It's not revenge. It's the calm, steady absence of your attention the very thing she once took for granted. The moment she realizes that ignoring you doesn't get her more attention, that her indifference doesn't lead to more effort from you, she begins to respect you again. Because deep down, women don't want a man they can control. They want a man they can trust, one whose emotions are not dictated by her moods or her choices. A man who stands firm in his boundaries becomes a source of stability. And stability is attractive. So never reward disrespect with attention. Never try to prove your worth to someone who's decided to overlook it. The greatest form of self-love is restraint, the ability to walk away from anything that doesn't meet your standard. When you master that, you stop chasing approval and start commanding respect. Because in the end, silence is not weakness. It's strength in its most refined form. It's saying, I know what I bring to the table, and I'm not afraid to eat alone. And when you reach that point, when your peace matters more than anyone's presence, that's when you truly teach her the price of ignoring you.